Hello, everyone. Just naturally waiting for a few moments to let people join because it's just dead on the hour right now. But whilst we're waiting, it would be really lovely to hear in the chat who you are, what organisation you're from, and is it raining or dry where you are? I will tell you right now that it is very windy and rainy where I am. Rebecca?
I have gorgeous sunshine in Brighton, so
What?
I'm feeling pretty lucky today. Yeah, it's nice.
And Ollie?
Oh, I love Brighton, Rebecca. I'm a bit jealous. I'm in the New Forest and it is cloudy. We've had a lot of rain and it's quite nice because the forest is coming back to life again.
Oh, that's so romantic. That's lovely, actually. Yeah. Okay, we're getting people typing. Rebecca, you've just written it and said it that it's sunny and bright and lovely. So we're just going to leave it until just about 5 past, just maybe a little bit before it, just to allow people to join. Oh, sunny in London. Cheryl, your homelessness service in Wales, lovely. Still got people joining. For those of you who are just joining us, we're asking you just to type in the chat who you are, what your role is, and if it's where you're based roughly, and if it's sunny or rainy or windy, whatever it is. So just a weather check-in also. We were speaking earlier in our team huddle about how it's turned very autumnal all of a sudden. And I had my first fire of the, like put on my cozy fire, and then got all these warning things about making sure I got my chimney swept. So, because it can be very dangerous, apparently. So I shall be doing that. Oh, Newcastle. Yay, sunny, Jenny. Excellent. Oh, sun is out in Pontypridd. That seems to be a very, very sunny day overall. That's lovely. Excellent. Okay, we've got 21 people altogether. Mandy and SNG, Newbury, very bright. Lisa, sunny. Leanne and Stirling, I'm intrigued, Leanne. Is it sunny in Stirling up in sunny Scotland? Okay, I feel like Carol from the weather. I think we should. I've got the accent and everything, haven't I? I think we can get started. Welcome everyone to today's webinar. I'm absolutely delighted that we are co-hosting this with our lovely colleagues at HACT. And really, when we were talking about the content of this webinar, it's so clear that this time of year for many of us on this call is the busy period. It's no surprise to anyone on this call that is the case, but today is really all about looking at the stats, the data that we've learned over the last few years, and delving much more into what's going well, what's working practically, and then thinking much more strategically about things also. I'm really looking forward to this session. And what I thought we would do to kick off is obviously do some introductions, and then go and have a look at the data that Lightning Reach has been holding over the last few years, building and learning and growing as we do. But yeah, basically, before we kick off, my name is Gemma. I lead on partnerships for Lightning Reach with housing associations. And in my previous role, I led on financial and digital inclusion with Southern Housing, so completely understand from a frontline perspective the demands, the pressures, the stress, let's face it, that people can face both from a front-facing role, but naturally with residents, customers, tenants perspective, it can be a really, really unsettling time of year also, not knowing how that money is going to stretch. So without further ado, what I'm going to do is start to share my screen, make sure that we've got it sharing correctly, and we can get going. Okay, can everyone see that first page and with a little thumb up for me would be excellent, thank you. Oh, lots of hands up, nice, thank you. Yeah, basically, let me get back to my slides. This content of this session, we're saying rapid responses to the rise in energy costs, preparing housing teams. Now that could be any sort of a frontline service, it's not specific to one role or another, for the winter pressures. Little bit about Lightning Reach. Some of you will know more or less about Lightning Reach, so I thought I'd just give you a really quick whistle-stop tour of who we are. So we're a fintech for good startup, founded during the pandemic in 2020, and we help make it easy for people to access a wide range of personalised support in one place. The way that I describe it is a tell us once approach. So far to date, we've facilitated over £20 million worth of support to individuals, with over 200,000 users and rising, as you would expect. With over 100,000 social housing tenants registered so far. We've got over 30 housing partners, and I'm not going to read the list, but this is just, and it's not an exhaustive list at all, but that's just to give you a picture of the sort of partners that we're working with currently. We're backed by lovely people like the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, Big Issue Invest, at Barrow Cadbury Trust and others. And so yeah, fintech for good, really just making sure that we're trying to make the really complex system of finding and locating help a lot more simplistic. The way that we partner with housing providers is that we can really empower users to self-serve, finding support when it's convenient to them. Can help triage referrals that you might be getting to help you understand the needs rather than just a generic needs help with benefits referral that sometimes we get. It lets you understand your residents' needs better, whether it's the beginning of the tenancy, whether somebody's fallen into arrears, whatever stage it may be. You can really understand and build that trust and rapport. You can also administer grants and help highlight either financial or non-financial support that you may have in-house also. So there's loads of ways that our housing colleagues are using the platform. And another way is really just to help drive consistency of service too, because as we know, as housing associations change and move, very often the geographical spread and knowledge base can be quite challenging to keep a grip of. And so Lightning Reach can be there to help drive that consistency too. All of this leads to a greater understanding of what our service users are needing. In the context of today, it would be helpful just to help highlight that we are actually working with a lot of utility partners also, and it's growing. These are some of our partners, but we've also got a number of the big utility providers in final stages, including gas and electricity and also water companies. So really exciting times for Lightning Reach. And the reason why I mention that is because if somebody's coming to us for help, it's going to be super quick and easy for them to identify, but not also identify, but then apply for support in a seamless way. I am very verbose, as you can tell, and I thought it would be very good to do a summary video just to give you a picture for those of you who are not familiar, because what we're then going to go on and do is explore the information that people have been completing that then helps us understand the needs at this time of year. So I'm going to put on a little video, put myself on mute, and this video is thanks to our lovely colleague Ollie, who is on the call.
Delivering support should be simple for you and the people who need help, but slow systems and long processes make it harder for everyone. With Lightning Reach, every step of the support journey is streamlined. Clients complete one form and can access your scheme plus a whole network of further support. You can easily manage your support scheme from application to award, and with Lightning Deliver, you can issue payments directly without needing a separate system. Smart Data enables organisations to act early by focusing on targeted support, creating the greatest impact. And the results of Lightning Reach are clear. Join the organisations working with us to support those who need it most.
Okay, just going to move on, and basically what we're going to look at now is that smart data slide. It's just maybe to visually bring it to life a little bit about when people have been completing the Lightning Reach profile, over 200,000 users now, what information is that telling us behind the scenes? Just frantically trying to get on from, there we go, lovely. Are you able to see that orange chart just checking in, a thumbs up or something? Lovely, Rebecca, I love your thumbs up. Okay, so looking at a breakdown of the use. Now, just to give you the context of this, this is a snapshot from October last year, because we're not into the winter period, if you like, now, the colder months. It wouldn't be very helpful for us to give the data from this year. So this is from last year, but I think that it will show, and when we see further on the other slides, some trends that are emerging that might be quite insightful. Probably not surprising, you know, I was picturing myself as a housing association lead, and really all of this just sort of confirms the information that we know when we've been delivering services like that for some time. It's just really interesting to see the other granular stuff that we're going to go on and look at too. And I know that Rebecca's going to look at this in more detail, but as you can see there, those who report in that they're struggling with home energy costs, the top of that bundle there is social housing rental service users at 78%. But as you can see, most tenure types, there's really small margins in between. So overall trend is, yes, a lot of people are finding that they're struggling. Breakdown by household and gender, again, probably not massively interesting, but just to confirm all of the assumptions that you may have, is that families with children are the ones that are struggling the most, particularly single parents, and a higher proportion are reporting struggling with home energy costs are women at 72% versus men at 65%. So yeah, that's just quite an interesting sort of a confirmation of, you know, what we would assume. This one I found quite interesting, and this shows the use of the Lightning Reach platform and the demographics that we are supporting. And you'll see that over the age groups, you know, there's like a clear spike between the ages of 30 to 60. We see the highest proportions of those struggling with energy. And at the same time, some pensioners may be missing out on those things that they don't know that they're entitled to. And so, yeah, you can see the differences there. All really in the high 70s, high to mid 70s of percentages. What I then thought I would do is have a look at over the last 3 years of the Lightning Reach platform usage. Now, you'll remember at the beginning, I mentioned that we had started in 2020, but thought that the last 3 years was probably the most meaningful information that we had. Now, when you look at this chart, the first one is the user awards by time, by type, and the engagements is the bottom chart, so the engagements on the platform. Both show very clearly that this is 2023, and we'll go on and look at the other years, that November is where we see the highest amount. You can look at the different sort of nuances of the types of support, and you'll see throughout the years that as the platform has been building and the support matches have increased, that the types of support has changed ever so slightly. But the overall trend is that you can see October getting a little bit busier. November is where it's hitting there as well. And you'll see as we continue into 2024, it remains high for the January. But then look again, you can see at the end of the year, it's your November spike that we're seeing once more. And finally, on to 2025. It's difficult because we're not in November, and you'll see actually that there's much more of a consistent use of the platform and support throughout the years, which is really comforting to me, because hopefully then we'll see that because people know that they can come and continually get support matches that are relevant to them, that there won't be as much of a spike. It might be that you know, we just don't know what that's going to be, but if the assumptions of the last few years, as you can see, are anything to go by, then you know, we're in for a busy time yet again. Something just to bring that visually much more into sharp focus is just to see the amount of registered users. And you can see again in 23, the first one on the left hand side, we had 15,000 users in the November time. The November 24, we had 10.5. If we look at like the January, which is something that we can compare on all three, we had 3.9 in 2023, 6.7 in 2024, and then 8.8 in 2025. So our user base is growing, but the continual usage of it, as you can see throughout the years, there's certainly that trend. And finally, just another one that, again, because I'm a wee bit of a data geek with this stuff, is just to show you the types of award. Unsurprisingly, the blue is for energy and utility, so that big colour spike that you see in different years. Now you see over the time 23, 24 and 25, the distribution of the types of awards has changed, but the blue consistency still is there. So that's the energy and utilities. Other ones interesting to call out, green on the pie charts is food and essential items. The dark blue is for furniture and appliances. Other ones to call out are the orange, which are housing related costs. So it could be help with a deposit, or it could be help with rent arrears, whatever that may be. And yellow, which you can see in all of them, different proportions obviously, but in the yellow, education and training for children is what that's alluding to there also. Another one just to call out, you can see it ever so slightly differently. Grey is health costs. So what's really, really helpful with all of this data is that you can see consistently that there's a trend for this, I should say, is for the full of that year, the calendar year, not financial year, calendar year. But it shows that pressures and requests for help are very much in what will be seasonal requirements as well. So without further ado, I'm so excited to hand over to Rebecca and hear from HAC's perspective what's been going on, you know, what great trends are out there and examples of best practices. So over to you, Rebecca.
Oh, thanks very much, Gemma, and really interesting to see the learning that Lightning Reach has gained over those years and the trends for that. So thanks, it's been really interesting. So hi everybody, good to be spending the morning with you all. I'm Rebecca Riley, I'm Head of Communities and Projects at HACT. And for those of you that aren't familiar with us, HACT is the Housing Association's charitable trust. And we are 65 years young, and we've been a friend and sort of supporter of the Housing Association and social housing more broadly across those years, from its early days of sort of helping to actually set up housing associations right through to today, where we support the sector with a lot around impact measurement, understanding and maximising social value, and also looking at how we can work together across the sector to really effectively invest resource in communities so that we create not only sort of affordable homes of bricks and mortar, but we create really happy and thriving communities. And we know that that's a core objective of the social housing space. So The work I do really sits in that latter part of the organisation's work. So I look after our Centre for Excellence in Community Investment and do a lot of work across the UK with those social impact teams who are really close to a lot of the pressures, like I'm sure many of you are today, and some of you may be familiar with HACT and have engaged in our work too. But yeah, really close to those teams and working alongside them in their work they do with communities. So Gemma is kindly sharing slides for me to avoid me having any tech hiccups. So we go on to the next slide. So when asked to have a think about this sort of topic, I suppose one of the things I wanted to share was why are there pressures? What is it that we're noticing that leads us not only as a staff team to feel the pressure as we head into the winter months, but what is it that's happening in communities and in sort of the wider landscape that's causing these pressures? And for HACT and many of our partners, including Lightning Reach, we've done a lot of thinking on this and looked at some of the larger sort of data sources that are out there. And the Joseph Rowntree's annual poverty sort of analysis is a really good place to have a look at to understand what that picture is. And at the start of this year, the Joseph Rowntree's report highlighted poverty rates and they had split them down by tenure types. So this graph here, this chart here, helps to show the numbers of people in poverty. And you'll see there that the third line down, social renting, illustrates how 44% of people in social rented accommodation are facing poverty. And now for us at HACT, that's the number we'll be looking at. But for many of you on the call, I'm sure those other numbers as well and statistics will be useful to you in just helping to set the scene for the context you're working in. So we're seeing really high numbers. And I suppose for us, that really correlates with some of the conversations we've been having with the sector about what is it that we're looking into. And I think there's a growing concern that what we're looking into are cycles of crisis. The work will fund cycles of crisis responses. Our communities are facing these cycles of crises. And essentially at HACT now, we're starting to really frame this work under the umbrella term of poverty, because we feel that that term helps to really express the seriousness of the issues that many of our communities are facing and the seriousness as well of the work we're doing in this space. So we're very much using that language. So if you hear me talk about poverty, that's very much where I'm at. So delving more deeply into the wider sort of statistics, it's worth highlighting that the number of social renters facing poverty is growing, as is the number of those in private rented sector is growing. And we know that social rent and housing associations are often working with people who are facing multiple disadvantages. So we shouldn't be too surprised that people living in these spaces are experiencing poverty. But one of the growing concerns is that the type of poverty that people are now experiencing is that sort of sharper end. It's either destitution or it's hardship and extreme hardship, as defined by the sort of Joseph Rowntree Foundation. So it's at the lower end of the scale. So the situation is becoming more and more concerning. And relating back to what Gemma was sharing earlier, we noticed as well in the Joseph Rowntree report that just over a fifth of social renters, so 21%, were in single parent families compared to sort of 5% of other tenures combined. The majority were in households where somebody had a disability. So we need to take into account that, some demographics and communities face sort of this hardship more keenly than others. Around a quarter of working age adults as well in social rented sector were not seeking work due to long-term ill health or a disability. So that was 26% compared to 4% of other tenures. And also people in social rented accommodation as well are more likely to have larger families, which increases the poverty risks as incomes have to stretch much further. And the Joseph Rowntree Foundation really did stress this year that the largest group of people facing poverty is children and young people, and that was across all tenure types. And in social rented homes, that was 48% of children and their families were facing poverty compared to other tenures. So there really are as well within this, not just the demographic, the sort of tenure types and communities in that space, but then there's intersectionalities at play that we need to be mindful of too. So it's for all of these reasons that our organisation at HACT have launched a new project called the Anti-Poverty Series. And it was through conversations about that project that Gemma and I really connected and thought, actually, yeah, we'd love to collaborate on today's session. Our Anti-Poverty Series is something that we are looking to provide space for the sector to do a deep dive into the different aspects of poverty that are facing communities today, identify where there are bright spots of practice and effective interventions so that we can share those across the sector, but also provide space for us to have a look at those longer term sort of interventions. So I think if we move on to the next slide, and that just gives a summary there of that project. So having spoken about poverty and why we think it's important to talk about it, really want to sort of share with you some thoughts on what those sort of shorter term responses can be to those winter pressures that many of you and your teams are facing. And these fall across three strands that I'm going to share. So one around sort of fuel support, one around food support, and one around sort of community hubs and the need for sort of important community spaces. And then I'll move on to share some reflections on what our responses can be to think about that longer term shifts that we might want to make and contribute towards. So starting off with the sort of shorter term support mechanisms. At HACT, we recognise that fuel poverty is a big contributor to sort of people's overarching experience of poverty and hardship in communities. And we know that in preparation for the winter months, connecting in with fuel support can be a really useful way to alleviate some of those energy bills that many people are struggling to pay, particularly with the rising energy costs. At HACT, for us, that we facilitate a fuel fund programme where we offer fuel vouchers across the UK, with the exception of Northern Ireland. So any of you on the call from Northern Ireland, apologies, our funder doesn't issue vouchers in Northern Ireland yet, but we are hoping to unlock change in that space. But if you're in Scotland, England and Wales, you're able to access this fund. So we're in our 5th consecutive year. We this year are issuing over 60,000 prepayment meter vouchers. Applications must be made through an organisation, so a housing association, a local authority or charity, for us to know that you're working alongside individuals and communities and can support them to utilise the vouchers effectively. And the vouchers are up to £49 each, and each household can have up to 6 vouchers per year. Our current fund opened in January and will run through until December or until the funding has been fully allocated. And it's worth letting you know that our fund this year has experienced higher rates than usual across the summer months, I think indicative of the continuing level of need that people are facing in energy. But as will come as no surprise to all of you on this call, the winter months are our busiest. The organisation details for how to register and everything or links on here, and I can share those afterwards. But just in recognition of how useful some of these sort of immediate crises supports can be, there's a few quotes there on the slide to share that with you. And I think when my colleague Vicky was having a look at the allocations of vouchers as well, she was noticing that there are sadly households who are repeatedly seeking voucher support over the last sort of 3 years, indicating that sort of crisis and cyclical levels of need that communities are facing is very much a reality in this fuel voucher and fuel poverty space as well. So just something there in terms of when you're gearing up for winter pressures, making sure that you're connected in with a fuel voucher or fuel support scheme that you can support your residents to access, I think is a really good way of providing some immediate relief for people's budgets. And HACT is one, but I know there are others as well. So, for example, if you're in Liverpool, the Tourist Foundation administer for that region. So they're another one you can go to locally, and there are a whole host of others too. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is looking now at food and thinking about gearing up for those winter pressures and having a look at where it is you and your communities are connecting in with sort of food support. And we know that there are vast numbers of food banks, growing number of social supermarkets and pantries, and also spaces where people can connect in for sort of hot meals and things like that. So again, as we gear up for winter pressures, making sure that the data you have on file is as up to date as possible and that you're familiar with what's coming in, maybe some dedicated winter support that local charities may be providing or you're providing, making sure that that information is really well known in the local area. From HACT's perspective, we've been working across the sector in London, working with Peabody, the Felix Project, who are a food distributor, and a number of community groups as well, to look at how we coordinate some of those sort of winter food efforts. And we have now been running for 2 years in a row what we call our London Food Winter Markets for communities. And this is where we help to take surplus food at a time when a lot of schools are closed over those sort of December and the Christmas period and New Year period, and other community centres are closing down for a break. Actually, that's the time when lots of supermarkets and farms have the greatest amount of surplus food, often that's of really high quality, and it's got nowhere to go. So the Felix Project do an incredible job of collecting up that food. And we're now working with housing associations and community groups across London to set up sort of pop-up winter markets, very much trying to frame these in that language to encourage those who may not always want to go to food banks or may find those spaces difficult to access, trying to reframe them as winter markets, trying to have maybe some other activities that are going on there, like face painting or live music for some have had as well, and people then to be accessing food in that space. And last year we were able to coordinate 63 dedicated food markets that equated to over 35 tonnes of food, and they worked out the equivalent of about 85,000 meals across London. And they're set up with sort of volunteers that are drafted in from housing associations and volunteers from the community who all get involved. And it's been a really effective way of bringing communities together and getting food to people that we know can be a really, really difficult time. So I'd encourage you that if you are not already working in partnership or with a number of organisations in your local places, considering how this sort of winter market model may work well for you, and that sort of pop-up approach and bringing in sort of other activities during that event to make it feel like a community event. We found that to be really useful. Next slide, please. Oh, and this is just a little bit more about the food markets and how that sits within our London Food Insecurity Network, that look at how we address sort of issues of food insecurity at a sort of really hyper-local level through the winter markets. And then we also look at how we can share practice across the capital in effective food insecurity measures, and are also looking at how we can influence policies in London and beyond in sort of the practice that's taking place across London. So if any of you do work in London, you'd be really welcome to join us in that network too. Next slide, please. So then when thinking as well about wider winter pressures and sort of those shorter term support mechanisms, really want to recognise that the growing emphasis on the need for warm hubs can be a really useful space to be connecting in with. So making sure that that information as you're gearing up for winter is as up to date as possible, and that you're ready to be signposting and supporting people to access those spaces. And I suppose people accessing those spaces for warmth, and having somewhere safe to be is obviously really, really important. At the same time, I really want to recognise the growing levels of social isolation and loneliness as well that can exacerbate the impacts of poverty. So we know that these two things in particular can impact on people's health outcomes. Consistently experiencing feelings of loneliness can equate to the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So actually, these warm hubs and other community spaces are really effective intervention measures that can support people during these winter periods. And we know that often a lot of other support services can be in those spaces too. But I just think there's something really important about how we nurture those community spaces at a time when there are widespread cuts. So if you're not in charge or own community spaces, how might you be an ally to those? Because they help to really support the health and happiness of local spaces. And I've just flagged here a few reports that were released this year that really help to demonstrate the value that these spaces can offer. So there's one we did at HACT on the sort of social value of community spaces and the specific elements that really do result in impactful measures for local people. And the recent new local report called Where People Meet that really look to the future as to the potential of community spaces and what they offer people in terms of connection as well. So if you're close to those spaces and work in that space and haven't had a chance to have a look at those reports, I could really, really recommend them. So I think there's something really important about those community spaces as well in this discussion about how we prepare housing teams for winter pressures. They can be spaces for you to connect with your residents and communities. They can be spaces for you to host events and offer support. And they can be spaces as well where people can connect, make friendships, and seek sort of community levels of support, and that they can sort of self-manage as well, which can often offer people longer term routes to sort of support in the longer term. So they were some feelings about the sort of shorter term things that, from our perspective at HACT, we noticed could be really effective in having to hand, but also wanted just to share some reflections on what you might want to think about as you prepare for winter pressures that can help, I suppose, affect those longer term changes that we really do want to see from our communities. So if we could have a look at the next slide, please. So last week I was at a conference where one of our partners was talking about how they'd strengthened their reporting measures to tell the story of their social impact interventions in communities. And as a result of their tracking their impact in a more consistent way and being able to then share that back with the organisation, that had really helped to unlock further funding and wider support for their work. So I just wanted to share that if you're not already identifying what those key measures are for you as you go in for winter that are going to help you track the numbers of people you work with and the difference that makes, I'd really encourage you to give that some thought with your teams and identify, even if it's a handful of measures that you're going to really have a look at and track carefully over the next few months, because that can really help tell a story to your wider organisation about the reach you have, the value that has to communities. It can also help you share that stories back with funders, local commissioners, and also help connect that story with the wider sector to share why communities are facing these challenges and the sorts of interventions that are then needed to help us break away from these cycles of crises. So tracking your impact, I think, is a really important consideration as we go into the winter months. If you if you work with your local authority or supply chain partners in the housing space, I'd really encourage you to have a think about how you leverage social value commitments to help support you over the winter months and perhaps get you more resource, whether that's in funding, numbers of volunteers, or broader sort of coverage of the great work you're doing that can help with all of those things. So if you're not already close to social value, or you know that there's a colleague in your organization who leads on that, I'd really encourage you to go and have a conversation with them to ask them what they're doing in the social value space that can help unlock more resource for you, and to help as well put your efforts on their radar because they may just not know. The other thing I'd encourage you to all have a think about as well is that peer support element. As Gemma mentioned earlier, these are really tough months we're about to go into. And I'm sure we're all really mindful of the pressures that has on our communities and the toll that can take on us as staff. Burnout is a real issue. It's not a risk anymore. It is an issue that's very much alive in this space. So if you're a team lead, thinking about how you have protective space in your team meetings or reflective practice sessions, I think is going to be even more important, and how you hold on to that in busy periods. If you've got a HR team, speak to them. What is it the organisation has in place to support the teams as you lean into these particularly tough months? Are there enhanced measures they can offer you as well? And also checking in at the end of days, if you're lone working, you're out and about in communities, making sure that you make that time for, yes, a text message to do the safety, part of our lone working policies, but also making time for those calls. It'd be really important to look after yourselves. So they were 3 things on how we lean into this work to affect change in the longer term as well. I think that's it from me, Gemma.
Absolutely wonderful. And I don't know if any of you noticed, I'd popped in, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A area of the chat. I'm aware that some people may have other meetings that they need to attend to or have a hard stop. So what we're going to do is make sure that we're finishing on just before the hour, but also to give you the reassurance that we're going to share the slides and the recording also. So yeah, just to let you know about that. Before we drop into questions, because I have a few, yeah, it's really interesting, all the stuff that you shared there, Rebecca, and it gives that wider context, but also really nice practical suggestions too. So thank you for that. I thought I would just bring it back to the real life people at the end of the solutions that we're delivering. So yeah, what I'm going to do is just share a case study. So this is one actually from the National Energy Foundation. So not a housing provider, but they are supporting people in a different perspective, and they're one of our partners. In 6 months, we helped facilitate 2,100, over 2,100 applications, awarded almost £10,000 worth of energy grants. And beautiful, which I really love about this, is 83.5% of people access not only the support from them, but further support as well. So it's that wider ripple effect that sometimes if somebody's in a community space that Rebecca spoke about and they find out about us, our support platform, and they go on and find not only one thing, but maybe other things as well, then that's just like, it's so much more sustainable and takes that pressure off of the teams as well that we are also very aware of at this time of year too. And just to bring that to a really nice personal story, this is Anne-Marie's story. So she received universal credit as her only income and had been struggling with energy costs during the colder months. She had been affected, as we were hearing there, it has longer term social isolation impact, as well as feeling just cold in your very bones. So our health and well-being had been impacted, but this was Anne-Marie's feedback, that she found the portal easy to use. I think she described herself as being old school, but even found that quite easy, the platform easy to navigate. She applied for support and received £147 worth of energy vouchers from Yes Energy, and received an energy efficiency pack from the NEF too for nice things like the radiator foil, window sheets, etc. And what she said was, it made such a difference. I could top up straight away and had even a bit of leftover for shopping. It meant a lot. So a little can go a long way in the, you know, an individual's circumstances. The main thing is that Anne-Marie's then tapped into a resource that if new matches become available, she'll be told about also. If it's okay, then what I would like to do is take a pause, stop sharing screens, and go to the members of the webinar and see if there are any questions whilst I'm waiting for you all to frantically type, because I know that you're going to ask some questions. I have a few off the back of what you were talking about, Rebecca. So the first one that I had was, how do we ensure that a time when services are sometimes viewed as nice to haves, that space is given for that tracking and reporting that you've spoken about? Have you heard any partners that it's worked well for, or good data collection techniques that you've heard around the sector that work well?
Yeah, thanks, Gemma. And I think it's a really good question, isn't it? Like, we're all scrambling around trying to do and support communities. So sometimes it can feel like, oh, forget the impact reporting, and I can understand that. I think I've seen a really good example of this last week, and it was somebody from 13 Group. They had made efforts to really identify sort of a handful, let's say like 5 core metrics that they thought were going to be really important. So they were looking at like rent arrear rates. They benchmarked them before they did anything, and then tracked those for that particular area and geography where they were then supporting the community, and then track those monthly to see what difference their community sort of investment work was doing. So that was one of the key metrics. The other as well was on sort of turnover, so the amount of people leaving properties. So I know she had a close look at that, and that was another one of the metrics they had a look at. And then it was tenant satisfaction. So they're a housing association, so that's one of the key measures anyway, but she honed in on that and then did enhanced sort of tracking with that community. And so just picked, I think, those 3 in particular, and then had a couple of others. But then had that before, did some of the community work. So they were sort of revamping the community green space outside. They had more community officers in the area, door knocking, letting people know what support was available, trying to build relationships. And then over that time, I think it was about a 6-month period, they noticed that arrears went down by over 10%. The turnover rate dropped dramatically, it was like over 50%. And customer satisfaction measures went up and increased dramatically. I think it was over 20%. So those numbers then could then pair up with the gorgeous stories and the sort of positive impressions that the community office was getting. She was able to take that story to sort of the director board of the organisation, say, look, through these measures we've done, I don't think it's any coincidence we've seen this change in our particular metrics we're really passionate about. That's then leverage for her more financial resources to do the community investment work in other areas. It's also helped, I think, other colleagues who may not be close to this sort of work with communities really connect in and see the value of it. So I think that's such, I think for me, that's a really good example, because she didn't try and track everything.
Yeah.
So it's about those few things.
Yeah.
And even if it's on a spreadsheet, like, agree what you're going to do, those 3 things, and do it really well. I think would be my top tip. And if there's a team meeting where you can collect that data as well, and it takes 5 minutes for all of you just to be in that room that you're in it already to bring it together, all the better.
Super motivating for the team as well, I'd imagine, if they can see like not only the pounds and pence are they impacting on, or keeping a house warm, it's about the bigger picture strategic stuff like the TSMs or things like that too. So yeah, I like that. Like, pick 3-4 things, do them really well, and then tell a strong story. Oh, thank you. Got 2 questions in the chat. Let's have a look. So Cheryl has asked, how widely is your service known to RSLs in Wales? Are you talking, Cheryl, just to sort of get a wee bit more clarity, are we talking from a Lightning Reach perspective, hack perspective, or both? I can tell you from a Lightning Reach perspective, Sasha, my colleague who's on the call, and I are trying to contact as many housing associations and look from a HACT perspective. Excellent, thank you. Yeah, we're really keen on speaking to as many Welsh housing associations as possible, but Rebecca, go for it. The question is for you.
Yeah, I hope it is. We do have a sort of a Wales network as well for many of those working in the sort of community investment space to connect in with, and that meets sort of every couple of months. So I can share the details with Gemma and Ollie for circulation, and Gemma and colleagues at Lightning Reach, if you'd like to join that space as well, to sort of connect into the sector, that's possible. Let's do it.
How positive. Oh, something more partnership working, love it.
Yeah.
And somebody else has asked in the chat if you're able to share the link to register for the fuel vouchers, so we can do
Yes.
that as follow up with the slides, etc. That's no problem at all. And Mark has put, do you think the switch from HSF to CRF will impact the ability of recipients to access financial support? So that is the Housing Support Fund to, now I'm not very good with my jargon, CRF. Mark, help me out. What's it called again? This is a new one that's starting next financial year. Customer something. We could say anything. Wait for Mark to particularly type. Anyone else can tell me, because no, one comment. Here we go. Crisis Resilience Fund. Yes, of course. Yeah, it's the same thing under a different umbrella, I guess. But I've got to be honest, I'm not close to the detail on that one to really speak about it. But from a Lightning Reach perspective, any of our local authority partners who have got their full matches on there, it's just going to be a seamless transition. What we do is that we ensure that local authority information is updated for any changes. So whether it's a light match or a full match, it basically just changes to that, and we can track the outcomes from it all the same. So nothing really changes from a tech perspective. From a practical perspective, Rebecca, I don't know from your side of things, have you heard any noises about this yet?
I think if I'm right, the HSS, so that Housing Support Fund, was much more like short term, whereas I think the Crisis Resilience Fund is looking at longer term funding, and then hopefully that can help support some longer term solutions. So I suppose I have a hope that will help to unlock support for interventions that might support people out of crisis.
Mm.
But I'm always mindful with any change in big government funding, the admin behind the scenes can be a nightmare. So if there's all the re-registering of individuals' data or organisations having to sign up as referral partners again, inevitably there will be people that fall through the gaps in that, and that'll probably be some of the most vulnerable in our society. So I suppose from a theoretical perspective, on paper, it could be a good thing, this shift in the fund type, but I know in practice that can have some real pain points. So that would be my initial bit, but I'm not too familiar with all the detail.
The thing, it's like we're in September now, you start sort of doing the deep research for that, like December, January, don't you? But yeah, really good that you're forward thinking about that. Mark, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts about that one. Even if you're not keen on having a chat about it, please feel free to pop your thoughts in the comments as well, and anyone else, just so that then we can share and learn too. If anyone does want to ask a question out loud, I would always invite that too. But in the meantime, just another time probably for another one question, or maybe we'll try and squeeze in two. So in relation, I was really interested about the social value commitments, and that's something that we are seeing a lot of traction with as well, is that, you know, a lift repair contract or a boiler contract has got that element of social value into it, that they can see the value of offers like Lightning Reach being able to fund that to show their wider impact as well. I know that being part of, from a housing association perspective, being part of those early conversations and almost going with a wish list of stuff that you're after has been really, really effective. Are there really any good examples that you've seen recently where social value has been leveraged to fund projects? And maybe if you could give an example, Rebecca.
Yeah, Gemma, just to say, I think that's such a good idea, having your wish list and taking that along to your social value colleagues and or the supply chainers directly, because sometimes they are coming into these sort of contracts not knowing what to direct that support to, or with a perspective that may not fit with actually the community needs. It may be something they've seen in their own community, but actually if they're doing work in a new space that they haven't worked in before, you've really got a lot of value if you're in that organisation and close to your community. Say, actually, that's great. However, our community most need this, and this is what would be great. So I think being assertive with that's really important. I think I saw a really good example of this actually yesterday when I was on LinkedIn. One of the sort of social value leads for a housing association, actually it works really closely with a lot of the supply chain partners to meet them in person, go out and see the work in person, and sort of galvanize volunteers for the works and the activities and the spaces, as much as getting the funding directed to the right place. So they brokered with one of their supply chain partners, who is one sort of construction firm, for them to regenerate a number of sort of spaces for communities. So it's like green spaces, or sort of they were concrete spaces that have been used as a dumping ground, some of them, into sort of community gardens or community sort of allotment spaces. And they'd really sort of said, well, actually, we don't just want one, we've got a whole collection here. And they packaged that up as an ask, which I thought was really clever.
Yeah.
And then they said as well how that company could utilise the volunteer days they offer staff to participate in the building and the regeneration of those spaces too. So those spaces did need, I think, some dedicated waste removal companies to do all of that sort of thing safely, but they built in that plan how the volunteers of that company could participate and see the value of what they were engaged in, as much as donating the money to it. And because it had a flow to it as well, this gorgeous story about all the green, community spaces they've revamped. So I think that was really, really good.
And beyond the sort of a well-being element, there's that sustainability element as well. So it's got that, again, ripple effect. I love that. Thank you. I thought I would be able to squeeze in another question, but I think we'll probably be stretching it a little bit. So thank you, everyone, for your time today. As promised, we will send the recordings and the slides. And any follow-up things that you think of, please feel free to drop me an email. And also we'll put the link in for the how to join the HACT Fuel Fund to Rebecca. Yeah, we'll do that. Brilliant. Well, have an excellent day in all your sunny locations, making me sick. And hope to see you all again very soon. Take care, everyone.